you conclude nothing else that they are extreme partisan radicals, and they're ready to go to war with a domestic enemy, conservatives.
Strong language from Rush. Bob Shrum is a Democratic strategist, and Phil Musser is a Republican strategist. Bob, I'm going to go to you first. Given that the Republican Party has struggled a bit, obviously, in recent months, including the November election, does the teabag effort make sense as a way to kind of jumpstart and create some energy, some excitement?
Well, actually, on the teabags, I think it's been less a tea party than a series of tea clatches. There seem to be dozens or a couple hundred people who've shown up at these places around the country. Overwhelmingly, the data show that people trust President Obama on the economy. They want to do what he wants. They believe that he is cutting middle-class taxes. So I think it's just another expression of Republican frustration.
And let me ask you, Bob, on this issue of the administration saying that some of the current events that we're seeing make it possible for these radical extremists to recruit new members. I mean, is it just a leap to think that they're talking about Republicans? They didn't even mention conservatives in this report.
Look, listen, when Rush Limbaugh weighs in, he weighs in heavily. And he clearly thought he had something to say here, so he was going to go after it. There's no word about conservative in here. There's no word Republican in here. The fact is that the FBI under George Bush last July issued a very similar report. And one of the worst terrorist incidents we ever had in this country, short of 9/11, came from haters who were anti-government and who bombed the federal building in Oklahoma City.
And by the way, left-leaning groups were targeted here in February by Homeland Security, who said that they could issue a cyber attack.
Very much.
Okay. Come on, you guys, let me in on this, will you?
Go ahead, Phil. Go ahead, Phil.
Well, thanks. I mean, look, here's something else to consider. If fueling suspicion on the right about this, obviously, is the fact this is leaked out a couple days before tax day, where there's a high-profile series of events around the country. I mean, Bob has worked with government at the highest level. I mean, you control the speed and the timing and rollout of these announcements. I think the fact that they're using language like right-wing suggests basically that, they're making an implied politicization of this document, which is unfortunate, okay?
But Phil, let me ask you a question, though. If you go back and you look at Timothy McVeigh, who was a veteran of the first Iraq War, who we know was politicized and was a part of the extremist movement in the early 90s, and that ultimately led to the tragedy in Oklahoma City, would in fact the government be unwise if they didn't think about these possibilities?
Look, absolutely, I think that the government should scan for every possible, threat, terrorist threat, domestic and international, of course. I'm not trying to make the argument against that, but what I'm saying is that language in documents like this often becomes politicized, and so the timing of it, the nature of it, is such that it's got a lot of, frankly, conservatives who think that there might be as much of a threat from big government on the left as there is from, people who are states' rights advocates on the right. So I think it's more about tone and timing than anything else, guys.
There has been a response from the VFW which says, look, most veterans are patriotic citizens. They would not join anti-government groups. But that's like saying most Americans are patriotic citizens, and most Americans would not join these extremist groups, and yet some do.
Look, the FBI
on the left
said this.
and on the right.
The FBI said this last July under Mueller, under the Bush administration. No one took offense. I don't see why conservatives are determined to include themselves in this critique, which is really a critique of the danger that comes from haters. And obviously we ought to be on the lookout for this. But let me make it absolutely clear. I don't think this is talking about Phil Musser. I don't think it's talking about Eric Cantor. I don't think it's talking about anybody in the Republican Party.
Thank you, Mr. Trump.
But you guys seem to think it is. I think it's, why would you pay yourself the disrespect to assume that this report is about you?
I think that, but here, look, I think the timing is really where I'm focused on this issue, Bob, because, we've got an interesting, virally organized, completely decentralized, organizations around the country around these tea parties happening that aren't tied and frankly aren't driven by the Republican Party.
Funded by conservative groups.
That are, no, let me press back on that, Contessa. That's not true.
That is not
true.
The main website for those teabag parties are funded by conservative groups.
Bill,
the
allow us to ask you
broad-based-
very specifically, how involved do you think former Majority Leader Dick Armey of Texas has been in coordinating this?
I think that there are a variety of people that have been involved with promoting this movement and this idea that big government is taking way too big a piece of the American life.
I want to ask you a very specific question about Dick Armey. How involved do you think Dick Armey has been, not in just supporting this, but in coordinating and facilitating this?
He's very involved and proud of it, Phil. Why don't you say that?
Sure. I'm sure Dick Armey is out there promoting this, just like a lot of other people have latched onto a movement that's largely a grassroots-driven movement. Don't try and take the energy of this movement, which is driven by kind of the average Joe through Facebook, social network sites. There's not a ton of money that's going behind this thing, and if you think there is, you're buying into the wrong view of a right-wing conspiracy. Because in this case, it's driven by the grassroots.
Phil, thank you. Bob, thank you as well. And by the way, I'm getting a lot of messages from that